Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature video number 136, Mysteries of the Rosie Cross. It's a text about the Rosicrucians, actually. This is a big one, because a lot of people have asked if I had any literature on the subject. A lot of it's too new, it's not certainly out of copyright, or it's a little bit sparse and not as interesting. This is a good one. It's part of the phallism series, but it doesn't dwell on phallism. I'm assuming that the Rosie Cross was considered to be close enough to the masculine cross, as the author would put it, for inclusion within the series. It's about a dozen different texts, actually, from Ophiolitrea and all of these others. Now, of course, as always, link in the description to my edition of this work. It's about 134 pages, so it's decent length. Second and third links are to my literary blogs, both on Blogspot and WordPress. Now, you can navigate around there. If you're into that sort of content, there's a great deal of other material. Now, first and foremost, there's a little bit of an aside on alchemy within this text. And in fact, the second, I believe, text that it references is essentially one long alchemical metaphor that has simply been turned into a sort of short story regarding the birth of Rosicrucianism. It is clearly an alchemical text. It uses some of the same symbolism and allegories. Certainly some of the same processes are alluded to, ascension, descent, and so forth, sublimation. So it's definitely, it contains an alchemical component large enough that I almost considered putting this work in the alchemy category. However, it goes beyond that. Most of the content here is not the author's own words. There's a little bit of that, the first chapter, and a little bit at the end, and some, bits sprinkled here throughout. But most of it is really Rosicrucian manuscripts that were translated, and then I've presented them verbatim, more or less. There were a few arcane words I cleaned up, and of course, the normal, the formatting and grammar. Mostly, though, I kept that in the somewhat more archaic English form that it was already in the actual original 1890s era text, because I don't have any way to look at the original translation necessarily and cross-compare. So that part, I didn't really edit for anything other than, making sure that the words were spelled properly. Things were in the proper format and things like that. And words that are occasionally, they have no modern equivalent that people would understand, can get cleaned up. But it's an interesting work, more or less full length for the era. And it talks about the Rosicrucians. It also has an interesting aside about the Freemasons and even mentions the Illuminati. So if you're into that sort of material, if you're into the sort of Masonry, secret society stuff of Rosicrucianism, you're definitely going to like this work. And if you like alchemy, if only for, again, that roughly 20-page long gigantic metaphor for alchemy that it contains. Really a story. It's almost a short alchemical manuscript more than anything else, but it's presented as a fiction piece. So it does have an element of occult fiction in it as well. It's basically a triplicate text. It's actually very interesting. And remember, this is part of the infamous phallism series, ascribed to Hargrave Jennings usually. Listed as private printing, normally. It didn't have a name on it. And basically was just a giant fuck you to the taboos of Victorian society. It was basically, hey, I'm going to do work after work, academic works talking about penises. That's essentially penises and vulva symbolism is what most of it boils down to. This particular text, other than mentioning the Rosie Cross itself, Rosenkreuz, the Rosicrucians as an order, other than that, it has no phallic inclusions. So really, in that sense, it's the odd man out of the series. But again, link in the description of my edition of this work. Second and third links to my books, blogs. If you're interested in the academic side of the occult or in alchemy, you're going to find a great deal of material there. That's about all. Peace out.